The hospital stood on the outskirts of town, its imposing facade looming over the surrounding neighborhood like a specter of despair. I'd heard the whispers of its grim history, the rumors of patients who had suffered and died within its cold, sterile walls. But the job market was tough, and I couldn't afford to be picky. So when I was offered a position as a night nurse in that desolate place, I reluctantly accepted. My first shift arrived with an eerie mist that clung to the building, casting it in an otherworldly glow. As I entered, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread wash over me. The corridors were dimly lit, and the flickering overhead lights only added to the ominous ambience. The air was stifling, heavy with the scent of antiseptic and decay. My duties were simple enough, checking on the few remaining patients in this decrepit wing, most of them clinging to life, but some already lost to the abyss. The staff on the night shift was minimal, just a couple of nurses like myself and an elderly security guard who had seen more than his fair share of the macabre. I settled into my routine, moving from room to room, taking vitals, and administering medications. The patients, or what was left of them, lay in silence, their eyes devoid of life. As I stepped into one room, I noticed an old woman lying in bed, her bony fingers clutching the thin sheets. She turned her head slowly to look at me, her milky eyes locking onto mine. "Help me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Her frail form trembled as she reached out towards me. I rushed to her side, trying to soothe her. "I'm here to help. What do you need?" Her eyes remained fixed on me, filled with an intense desperation. "You must find it. The locket. It's the only way." I frowned, not understanding what she meant. "What locket? Who are you talking about?" But her eyes closed, and her body went limp. She was gone. I shook my head, dismissing her words as the ramblings of a delirious patient. But as the night wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss in that hospital. I continued my rounds, tending to the living and the dying. The hospital's creaking and groaning echoed through the silent corridors, making every step an ordeal. As I reached the end of a particularly long hallway, I heard a faint, haunting melody drifting through the air. It was a piano, its notes both melancholic and beautiful. Curiosity got the better of me, and I followed the sound, my footsteps echoing on the cold, tiled floor. The music led me to a forgotten and disused wing of the hospital, a place where time had stood still. It was there that I found the source of the ethereal music, a grand piano tucked away in the corner of an abandoned waiting room. I approached the piano cautiously, the keys moving on their own as if played by invisible hands. The room was devoid of life, yet the music persisted, echoing through the empty halls. The tune was hauntingly familiar, and it sent shivers down my spine. Suddenly, a shadowy figure materialized beside the piano, its form indistinct and ghostly. I gasped, taking a step back, but the figure beckoned me closer. Its eyes, filled with sorrow and longing, seemed to implore me to stay. Without thinking, I approached the piano, and the figure reached out its translucent hand, placing it on mine. The touch was ice cold, and I could feel a surge of emotions emanating from it, fear, despair, and a yearning for release. As the figure and I played the mournful melody together, the room seemed to come alive with spectral apparitions. Patients, doctors, and nurses long departed from the world of the living swirled around us, their faces etched with pain and torment. The wailing crescendo of the piano reached a fevered pitch, and I felt as though I was being drawn into a vortex of despair. I broke free, stumbling backward, and the music abruptly ceased. The figures faded away, leaving me alone in the decaying room. My heart raced, and I realized that I had just encountered something beyond the realm of the living. The next morning, I confided in one of the veteran nurses about my eerie experiences. She regarded me with a mix of sympathy and concern, her eyes haunted by her own encounters with the hospital's dark history. "This place," she whispered, "it's cursed. There are secrets hidden here that go back decades. You must be careful. Some say the spirits are bound by the hospital, unable to find peace." I listened, my apprehension growing with each word. The hospital had been home to countless tragedies, a repository of pain and suffering that had seeped into its very foundation. Over the course of the next few weeks, I had more unsettling encounters. Doors slammed shut on their own, footsteps echoed in empty hallways, and the chilling presence of the unseen lingered around every corner. The whispers of patience and the eerie music of the phantom piano haunted my dreams. One night, I was drawn to the basement, a place long abandoned and shrouded in darkness. The sound of weeping led me deeper into the bowels of the hospital. There, in the dim light, I saw a young girl, her tattered hospital gown soaked in blood, standing in a corner. Tears streamed down her pale face as she gazed at me with empty, soulless eyes. She muttered incoherent words, and it became clear that she was reliving a traumatic event from her past. I couldn't leave her like that, trapped in her endless torment. I reached out to her, and as I touched her hand, a wave of coldness washed over me. Her voice grew stronger, and she repeated a name, Emily. It was as if she was trying to convey a message, to tell me about someone or something important. With a newfound determination, I delved into the hospital's history, searching for any mention of an Emily associated with the place. I unearthed a newspaper article from the late 60s. It told the story of a young girl named Emily who had mysteriously disappeared from the hospital. Her body was never found, and her fate remained a grim enigma. I felt an eerie connection between the spectral girl I had encountered and Emily's tragic disappearance. It was as though she was trying to communicate her story, to find closure for the pain that bound her to the hospital. As I dug deeper into the past, I learned of an old employee who had worked in the hospital for years, a woman who had carried the weight of the hospital's dark history. She had known Emily, and in her later years, she had become obsessed with finding her. One day, I paid a visit to the retired employee's home. Her memory had been fading, but she still held onto fragments of the past. She spoke of a locket, a precious keepsake that had once belonged to Emily, the same locket mentioned by the dying woman on my first night at the hospital. She led me to a dusty box filled with old photographs, documents, and, eventually, a small locket. It was an ornate piece, adorned with a delicate, heart-shaped pendant. Inside was a faded photograph of Emily, her youthful smile frozen in time. The retired employee's voice quivered as she recounted how she had hidden the locket in the hospital, fearing that the sinister forces that lurked within the building would take it from her. She urged me to find it, to bring it to Emily's restless spirit. Determined to unravel the mysteries that haunted the hospital, I returned to the dark, foreboding place one final time. Armed with the knowledge of the locket's whereabouts, I ventured into the basement. The weeping girl, Emily's apparition, watched me with anticipation. I discovered a hidden compartment beneath the floor, where the locket lay hidden for decades. As I picked it up, the atmosphere in the basement grew heavy with unseen forces. The girl approached me, her eyes now filled with a glimmer of hope. I placed the locket around her ghostly neck, and at that moment, a blinding light filled the room. Emily's spirit, no longer trapped in sorrow, began to ascend, her form dissipating into the ether. The wailing and weeping that had filled the basement subsided, replaced by a profound stillness. I had played a part in releasing Emily's spirit from the hospital's tormented clutches. The weight of the place seemed to lift, and a sense of peace settled over the forsaken building. The dark history that had gripped the hospital for so long was finally beginning to fade. In the weeks that followed, the atmosphere within the hospital began to change. The eerie encounters and spectral apparitions grew less frequent. It was as though the souls of the departed had found a measure of solace. As I continued my work as a night nurse, the hospital transformed from a place of dread to one of quietude. The patients who remained seemed more at ease, and the staff experienced fewer inexplicable occurrences. But I couldn't forget the horror and mystery that had unfolded within those grim walls. The hospital, though no longer a place of terror, bore the scars of its past. The memories of the restless spirits, the spectral music, and the haunting secrets would forever remain etched in my mind, a testament to the chilling history that had unfolded there. Even now, as I reflect on those harrowing nights, I can't help but wonder how many more stories lay hidden in the shadows of that forsaken hospital, waiting to be unearthed by those brave enough to venture into the heart of darkness.